Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto was, for a lack of a better word, sick of everything. Everything was building up and a few thoughts had been going through his head. He found himself thinking about a very important topic, for anyone in his situation. That was loyalty, not in just the sense of his loyalty, but loyalty on a whole basis. His and theirs. He was currently sitting in his old rundown apartment that had been vandalized and desecrated on the outside so many times. He remembered how his day went, and it wasn't good. He had fulfilled his promise to her and brought back him, and what did he get from it? It was like his childhood all over again. He was brought back to being the demon, the one who was to blame. Everyone took his side, save for a few. He remembered it very clearly indeed. Flashback start. Naruto found himself staring up at the white room, watching the ceiling fan spin and spin, ignoring his thoughts about what happened at the Valley of the End. He was in the hospital. He looked down to see the mark where Sasuke's Chidori hit him. It didn't leave a scar though. He had always had that insane and ridiculous healing factor of his, so he knew he would be fine. He didn't know if he could say the same for Sasuke though. He did hit him with a Rasengan that was enhanced with the Kyuubi's chakra, so it was reasonable that he did do quite a bit of damage to the boy. However, nothing could prepare him for what would transpire on this day, and it would change him forever. With no going back whatsoever, he would have to make a choice. One that would be his hardest to date. Suddenly the door opened and in walked Shizune. She was instantly happy to see him awake. He smiled at seeing the Hokage's assistant. Naruto, how are you? She quickly asked, clearly worried. He chuckled a bit and sat up a bit more. A bit sore, but nonetheless I'm good, he said. She sighed and nodded, then she sat down. Tsunade was worried like crazy after seeing you in your previous condition. You look to be fairly recovered. So I will get you released, you just have to take it easy for a few days, she said. He nodded and thanked her. She quickly walked out of the room. It was a few minutes later and she returned and smiled. You're free to leave the hospital, just remember what I said, she said. He nodded and stood up out of the bed. He noticed his clothes were on the nightstand by it. So he quickly took them and walked into the nearby bathroom. A few moments later he walked out in his normal orange jumpsuit. He noticed Shizune had already left. He knew she had duties that needed to be taken care of. So he quickly walked out of the hospital, not thinking at all about what this day would bring and the consequences it would have on the world he knew. Before he knew it, he was already walking along the streets of his village when he heard a voice behind him. He instantly knew who it was. However, he knew she wasn't happy, but he didn't know why though. Hey you. It was Sakura. He turned and looked at her in confusion. Why was she looking at him like that? Sakura, what's wrong? He asked quickly. Her scowl seemed to worsen as she heard him. What's wrong? You nearly killed Sasuke, she screeched angrily. His expression changed from confusion to annoyed quickly. She was the one who asked him to bring him back in the first place, and he was trying to kill him too. So how was he not supposed to fight back with equal force and not risk dying? Why are you being like this? I brought him back like you begged me to, and now you're blaming me for nearly killing him. Last time I checked he was coming at me with a Chidori as well, he retorted dryly. She seemed to falter a bit, however her face contorted back to rage. However, before she could speak up, another voice came into the fray. Even so, Naruto, you lost control of the Kyuubi and used a Rasengan at quite a close range. Not to mention the Kyuubi's chakra strengthening its power. It was Kakashi. He turned to his sensei and glared. This was starting to turn into a real shitstorm for him. So you're siding with her? You say that I lost control of the Kyuubi, while that is true. Don't forget the fact that Sasuke was using the cursed mark he got from Orochimaru. I had no choice in the matter. It was a simple flip of a coin to me. Either risk it and have a chance of being able to match him, or staying calm and most definitely going in there without any sort of power-up, which would have been suicidal, he said quickly. He was starting to feel the Kyuubi trying to come out. He needed to get away from them quickly before he blew up. I thought you of all people would take my side, Kakashi, but no. You're blind and fail to see past the fact that just because I lost control, that I'm in the wrong. You know what's also funny? I knew you liked Sasuke better. I mean, you straight up ditched me to train him and her for the Chunin exams. He roared. Both of them faltered. It seemed Naruto was getting closer to his limit, and would break soon. Then there would be no going back. Kakashi tried to speak up, but Naruto already started walking away. The damage was done and he knew he couldn't fix what happened. It was already said and done. Sakura just glared at him. Naruto felt her killing intent and stopped dead in his tracks and turned back to her. What? Got something to say? He said through gritted teeth. Her glare just hardened. Yeah, I guess my mother was always right. You truly are a demon. She screeched. Kakashi realized what came out of her mouth and turned to Naruto. His eyes were closed and was breathing in and out slowly. He was suppressing a ton of killing intent on his own will. When his eyes opened, they weren't the cerulean blue eyes. No, they were the red eyes that held all his pain, anger and hate. He glared at her and spoke. You know what? I can't believe I ever thought of you as a friend. All you did was reject me and push me around or call me stupid, then fawn over Sasuke. You're shallow, and I hope you realize Sasuke can't be saved. I know that now. So I'm done. You want him so badly. Next time you jump into the fray and try to convince to come back, 'cause I won't. He roared at her. She quickly stepped back. Kakashi knew what's done is done. He just hoped this didn't affect them too much. He knew that was a hopeless thought though. Sakura didn't have any words as both of them watched Naruto's retreating form. Naruto needed to calm down quickly, so he walked to the one place where he was always happy, his favorite shop. Ichiraku's. He needed some ramen too, he was starving. Before he knew it, he already had a bowl in front of him. Suddenly he felt someone sit next to him. It was Jiraiya. He sighed as he heard him speak. So kid, tell me what's wrong. I know there's something that's bothering you. He said. Naruto looked up. An argument took place between me, Kakashi and Sakura. He said. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. He knew something was wrong now. Naruto never fought that badly with his teammates, and if he did, it was over something stupid, but the look on Naruto told him that this time it was serious. What was said? He asked. Naruto began to recall their argument, and as Jiraiya listened he could understand where he was coming from. I see. Naruto just remembered, don't listen to what they think about it. Just know that you did what you had to. If you didn't, who's to say you would still be here? He said. Naruto nodded to his sensei and looked at him. Thank you. He said. Jiraiya nodded and looked up. Now I got to go. If you need someone to talk to, don't hesitate to come to me again, or someone you know who would listen to you. He said quickly. Naruto nodded and watched as Jiraiya walked off. However, even with his comforting words, the damage was already done. Now he was slowly wondering about what to do, and he had no idea what was going to happen in the next day. It would shake him to his core and make him choose, and his life would never be the same. However, it would mean a change for the future, for a new chance at life. To really live and not be a victim. He quickly finished his food and started to walk away from the shop. As he walked in the streets, he noticed glares from the usual people. It seemed things never would change for him. He was walking for so long and he was lost in his thoughts that he didn't notice the footsteps behind him. He heard a cough behind him and turned to see Ino, Shikamaru and Choji. He growled as he saw their expressions. It seemed Sakura had already told them, most likely a exaggerated truth though. What? He asked dryly. Ino stepped forwards and spoke up. Who do you think you are? Speaking to Sakura like that? Not to mention your sensei Kakashi? She asked angrily. Shikamaru just shook his head. Choji shrugged and started to eat again. Ino flinched from Naruto's glare. Really? Who do you think you're rebutting in when it isn't your business? You weren't even there. Do you know what was said at all? He shouted. They all widened their eyes. Naruto was getting angry, and fast. If you think Sakura is right, then go ahead and take her side. I already told my side and explained why I'm right, and I don't regret what I said at all. Sasuke came at me with the intent to kill. So I had no choice. He shouted. The Kyuubi started to come out again. Ino glared at him, Shikamaru was as well. That wasn't very smart thing though, you could have gone about it differently. Shikamaru added. Naruto glared at him, Shikamaru flinched as he felt the killing intent. Like I told her, I don't care what you think. I don't give two shits to what your opinion is. So butt out. He shouted. He quickly turned around and started to walk away. He heard some mutterings and curses, but ignored them and continued forwards. He shortly arrived at his apartment and slammed the door and fell on the bed, instantly falling asleep. He was done with it all. Flashback end. That was yesterday. He didn't care anymore. He didn't care what they thought. He had dealt with their opinions with him all his life and he wasn't too thrilled about it. He was about to get up and go to the Hokage's monument, to clear his head. However, he felt lightheaded and fell back on the bed unconscious. He suddenly found himself in his mind, he knew where he was. He didn't know why though. He looked at the cage that held the Kyuubi, it looked at him for a minute. Brat, come closer, he said. Naruto flinched at his tone, it was its normal bitter one, but there was something else to it. Naruto didn't know what made him, but he complied and walked to the cage. I can sense your mind is in turmoil, now I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you kid. I can see what you see, I know what has transpired yesterday, the question for you is what would you do about it to change your future? He suddenly asked. Naruto blinked, was this right? Was he actually having a civil conversation with him? Why do you care? Naruto asked suspiciously. The Kyuubi made a snorting sound before speaking up. Contrary to popular belief, I am not evil. Even if you are a stubborn brat that needs to learn some respect, I have no choice in the matter. You are my host and if something were to happen to you, I would be affected as well. He explained. Naruto blinked, but nonetheless spoke up. What could I do about it anyways? Most of the village thinks I'm a demon, I know my attempts would be futile. They'd never see me as Naruto Uzumaki. No, they see me as a nuisance and nonetheless a demon. He said. The Kyuubi looked at its host for a minute before relenting. Listen, I'm going to be straight with you. Blunt as a matter of fact. What you say is true, with me and you, you'd never really get respect for who you are. Now I'm not suggesting freeing me, I know how that would turn out. No, what I'm saying is why do you place your trust in people would already turn their backs to you? Why do you try to get them to acknowledge you when you know what the result will always be? With what happened yesterday is more proof to me. He said. Naruto sighed and realized there was some truth to what he was saying. Can you just get to the point? He asked dryly. The Kyuubi just snorted. Figures you'd say that, okay then. We know you aren't really welcome in this village and most of the people who are your friends have turned, now let's put in a hypothetical and say you had a choice. You could stay in the village and never see any change in how they treat you, or you could throw caution to the wind and say it. Leave the damned place and start a new life. He said with a chuckle. Naruto's eyes widened. Become a Missing-Nin. Are you insane? He screeched. The Kyuubi rolled his eyes. Yes, a Missing-Nin. Now if this were the case, you wouldn't be alone, I'd personally train you how to use my chakra, so that you'd stand a chance against the hunters. He explained. Naruto's eyes widened again, if he did do that he could get incredibly more powerful. He could even learn new jutsus from the other villages. It was tempting indeed. He knew there was a catch however. What's the catch? He asked. The Kyuubi laughed. You're right, there is a catch. Now if you were to stay here, you'd eventually break and lost control and well, they might not want to deal with you. Who knows what could happen. Now if we were to do the first option, it would be hard to escape. I could do it though, if you gave me control over your body, now this isn't permanent, just to get a good distance away. As to the catch, well first would be some leeway, give me some room to breathe in here. Then I would like to at least get some more time to control you. Preferably to fight. He explained. Naruto was weighing his options. He needed to know if there was any more to it. Is there anything else? He asked. A few things as well, but we can discuss those at a later date. Now there are some other things I think I should tell you. He said quickly. Naruto blinked again. What was he getting at? What is it? He asked. He heard what he assumed to be a sigh coming from the Kyuubi. Boy, it's about your parents. Why do you think they never told you your true parentage? They're hiding some very important details from you. He said. Naruto's eyes widened. It couldn't be true. Could it? He looked sharply at the Kyuubi. Explain. Was all he said. The Kyuubi chuckled a bit. That got your attention, huh? Well, it's true they are hiding something from you, and I know what it is. You see, your parents are rather famous, and powerful. Especially your father. He started. Naruto's eyes widened again and he needed to know. Who are they? He asked quickly. The Kyuubi looked at him seriously. You want to know? You need to make a choice. If you knew who they were and you stayed here, it would only cause problems. Now if you were to leave and then find out, you could benefit from the knowledge better. He said quickly. Naruto blinked and got angry suddenly. He was being bribed. The Kyuubi was bribing him. Really? He asked dryly. The Kyuubi nodded numbly. Naruto sighed and looked at him. Give me some time to think it over. He said. The Kyuubi chuckled and nodded. Before Naruto knew it, he was already waking up. He quickly got up and started to think about his conversation with the Kyuubi. He was willing to train him and give him knowledge about his parents. That is if he followed what he said and left the village. He was tempted to do it after all, and all he needed was little push and he would. He didn't know that the push he needed was coming in soon. Sooner than he thought. Before he knew it, the sun had set and he wasn't back in his apartment yet. He was walking towards the Hokage's monument to think. He needed to decide what he was going to do and fast. He knew there were Anbu members watching him closely. There was no doubt in his mind. People were noticing the change in his attitude and would come to investigate it. Soon he was sitting atop the monument and was watching the night sky and he suddenly heard footsteps behind him. He turned around to see Kakashi and a few Anbu members. Naruto, why are you up this late? Kakashi asked curiously. Naruto didn't speak. He didn't trust himself to control himself from his boiling rage. Why do you care? He spat. They noticed his tone was bitter and unforgiving. Kakashi sighed and spoke again. Tsunade wants to see you now. There's something she needs to talk to you about. He said. Naruto didn't move. He looked up before speaking. How can I trust what you say? He muttered. Everyone heard him and wondered what he was going on about. What do you mean? Kakashi asked quickly. Naruto turned around to look right at him. All my life, I've been treated like a demon by the villagers. I'm sick of it all. My loyalties are in question. Why am I even here when I'm lied to and being treated like I am? He asked aloud. Kakashi looked at him shocked. What do you mean? He asked hesitantly. He was afraid of the answer. The Kyuubi told me he knew who my parents are, so if you knew, why'd you lie about it? Naruto said aloud. Kakashi sighed and looked at him. I think it's time to go to the Hokage, Naruto. He said. He was avoiding the question. Naruto just started laughing. No, I don't think so. He muttered. The night air was chilling. No words were said. However, everyone that was in the area could feel the spike in chakra, and it was enormous. Currently at the scene was Kakashi. He didn't expect this at all. What have you done to Naruto? He asked seriously. The Kyuubi chuckling noise, and glared at the man. Why do you care? You'd rather train that Uchiha or that pink-haired girl rather than my host. You know it's true too. Remember the Chunin exams? He said dryly. Everyone was shocked at his words, for one reason. It seemed that he actually cared for the boy. Kakashi still didn't care. Why did you take over his body? He asked angrily. The Kyuubi snorted and laughed aloud. I'm afraid you're mistaken. Naruto has given me control, not the other way around. I have his permission to take over. He dropped a bomb on them. They were shocked. What was going on? What was the Kyuubi planning to do? Before anyone could speak up, a couple more people arrived at the scene. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Asuma, and some of Naruto's friends were there. Ino was clearly shocked at seeing the chakra. Shikamaru's eyes widened as he saw it. A crowd was gathering. Sakura arrived in time with Sasuke, who still was hurt. He was wide-eyed at the sight before him. What is going on? Tsunade shouted in fury. The Kyuubi turned to the fifth Hokage and chuckled. Oh, nothing except explaining a few important details. I was waiting for a good-sized crowd to listen to what I'm about to say, and now the time is right. He said with a chuckle. Everyone felt uneasy at his words. What was about to be said? Jiraiya didn't even hesitate and shouted. What have you done with my student? He shouted. The Kyuubi looked at him boringly and replied. Your student. Please, all you taught him was how to do the Rasengan. Granted, he does think of you as his real sensei, rather than that piece of shit Kakashi. Now that everyone is here, I think it's time to clear the air a bit. Get some stuff off my host chest that needs to be said. Firstly, you are bastards and backstabbers, specifically you two. He said. Everyone watched as he pointed at Kakashi and Sakura. They wondered what had happened. Jiraiya sighed and looked at the Kyuubi. They know what they did, but that doesn't explain the fact why you're in possession of Naruto. He said. Everyone wondered what he knew. What happened? Tsunade asked quickly. Kakashi looked down and Sakura didn't even say anything. She glared at the Kyuubi. Those two had an argument with Naruto and it seemed it affected him deeper than I thought. Jiraiya spoke up. Tsunade looked enraged. She stomped over to Kakashi and got in his face. What did you say? She asked, furious. Kakashi sighed and explained what went down the day before. As Tsunade heard it, she only got more angrier at him and her apprentice. She walked over to Sakura and glared at her. What right do you have to judge how he acted? If he didn't do what he did, he could have died. She shouted. Sakura glared back at Tsunade and replied back. I don't care what he thought was right. He almost killed him. She shouted stubbornly. A loud smack was heard suddenly. Everyone turned to see a red mark on Sakura's cheek. Tsunade had smacked her hard. No one expected that at all. They knew Tsunade was a mother figure to Naruto and would do anything to protect him as well. They should have expected her to do that though. I have half a mind to punish both of you for what you have caused, however we have bigger problems to deal with right now. She said aloud. Everyone turned to the chuckling Kyuubi and wondered what was going on. You're right, Tsunade, we do have bigger problems to deal with. He started to say. Everyone narrowed their eyes. How did you take over? She asked quickly. He chuckled again and replied to her. Like I told Kakashi over here before, Naruto did give me permission willingly. Me and him have come to an agreement of sorts. He explained. Everyone tensed and prepared for a fight. What agreement? Kakashi asked quickly. He looked at everyone around him before speaking up. This is a day everyone will remember. On this day Naruto Uzumaki leaves the Hidden Leaf village. He is going to crave a path throughout history starting with this day. He announced. Everyone's eyes widened. Naruto was going to become a Missing-Nin. They all thought horrified. Everyone started to prepare their own separate jutsus to try to combat the Kyuubi and prevent him from leaving. I also should spill a bit of a secret that many of you don't know, it's about Naruto's parents. He said with a grin. Instantly Tsunade, Kakashi, Jiraiya all looked terrified and turned pale. He wouldn't, would he? They quickly thought. What do you mean secret? The Dobi was left in an orphanage. Sasuke shouted. The Kyuubi glared at him and spoke up. It seems you don't think things thoroughly, do you, boy? How do you think he came into this world? The truth about his parents started on the day this village was attacked by me. Granted, I was under mind control by that bastard behind the mask. You see, it was covered up in an attempt to hide his true parentage, and keep him out of harm's way, but that. I say let them know and fear his true name. He shouted. The three who knew the secret dreaded what was about to be said next. What do you mean true name? Sakura asked curiously. The Kyuubi turned to her and snarled. Little girl, all those times you called my host idiot or moron. You didn't realize his potential, due to the fact his real name. Granted, he took his mother's name and not his father's. Time to cause a bit of chaos among yourselves. His father's surname is Namikaze. He said. Silence, that's all that was heard after his statement. The people who knew that name eyes widened. The secret was out. Yes, that's right, Minato Namikaze, your very own Yondaime Hokage, is his father. He said aloud. Everyone's eyes widened now that the secret was out. The Kyuubi smirked and started to speak again. Now that is done with, Naruto wishes to let you know that you won't find him again. From this day onwards he is no longer a shinobi of the leaf. Next time you see him, he won't be so forgiving of the people who betrayed his loyalty and trust. As for the others, he holds no resent, however he can't stay here anymore. He continued. Before anyone else could speak up, Tsunade did. Stop him from leaving, she shouted. The Kyuubi smirked and cracked his joints as he felt everyone's chakra rise. This was going to be fun. Fun indeed. He quickly dodged a Chidori from Kakashi, and everyone watched as one of the tails wrapped around the arm of Kakashi and threw him backwards. They were shocked he could manipulate the chakra like that. How? Sasuke asked quickly. He wondered how something like that could happen. They did outnumber the Kyuubi by a good bit. Kid, I'm the Kyuubi no Kitsune. This power is my own, I know how to wield it with deadly precision. He snorted. Everyone tensed again. They knew now they were in for the fight of their lives. They all watched slowly as the Kyuubi started to form a familiar hand seal. It was very familiar to them indeed. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he said quickly. Suddenly 5 puffs of smoke appeared and clones came out. They were all clones of the Kyuubi too. Everyone felt the chakra the clones had, it was immense. The Kyuubi was truly terrifying when it wanted to be. Everyone watched as the Kyuubi smirked and started to speak. I'm afraid stopping me is impossible, it is futile. He said quickly. No one listened and they charged forwards with the intent of stopping him to their fullest abilities. Suddenly everyone froze as the Kyuubi started to charge a large amount of chakra. They watched as his tails started to turn darker as 2 more formed. He was in his 4 tails form, and it didn't look like he was going to hold back. With no words said, everyone charged once again. Kakashi quickly formed another Chidori, but it futile as it was met with a clone's Rasengan. The clone was using the vermilion version of the move, effectively making overpower the Chidori by a large margin. It was a battlefield. Ino's team were dealing with 2 clones and were hopelessly outmatched. Tsunade and Jiraiya were taking on the real Kyuubi in its 4-tailed form. Jiraiya decided he had no choice. The Kyuubi watched with interest as he noticed the man's chakra rising by a large bit. Tsunade noticed it too and turned to him. They watched as he placed his hand on the ground. He was doing a summoning. They watched as none other than Gamabunta the chief toad was summoned. Jiraiya, why have you summoned me? He asked aloud. Jiraiya pointed to the Kyuubi. We need to stop the Kyuubi from escaping. He explained. Gamabunta took a look at what was currently going on. It was a big situation, no doubt. The Kyuubi growled as he knew this fight was starting to get a bit unfair. He was in his 4-tailed form and he was about to face off against the chief toad, who no doubt could easily handle him in his 4-tailed form. He quickly came up with a plan. It was a last-ditch effort, being that they were still on top of the Hokage's monument. He could get a little reckless. He knew Naruto wouldn't like it if he destroyed the village. He wanted to leave and start anew, not destroy it. Everyone watched as the clones dissipated, leaving the Kyuubi to himself. They knew he was planning something. He suddenly roared and charged his chakra even higher. He was starting to gain more tails. He stopped at 6. Everyone stared at him as pieces of bone started to form on top of the chakra he possessed. Surprising everyone, he curled his tails around him and swung them in a windmill motion. He was trying to create some room. He proceeded to leap in the air and formed 2 large Rasengans in his hands. They wondered what he was planning. It seemed like he was going to fall down to the ground and aim them at the ground, however they were shocked as he placed both of them together. In an instant they blew up, thus launching him higher into the air. He was about a good 40 feet in the air. They all started to run away from the blast site as he plummeted back towards the ground. They all watched as he neared the ground. He slammed his tails like a hammer and made a big shockwave, knocking everyone back and kicking up a lot of dust. He knew it was time to make his getaway while everyone was distracted. 10 minutes later all the dust cleared away, leaving a shocked group of shinobi. All of them realized what had happened. Tsunade was enraged. Jiraiya was too, however for different reasons. He glared at Kakashi and Sakura as the silence rolled on. I want him found now. He is now a missing nin. Bring him back here at any cost. Tsunade shouted in fury. She then looked to Kakashi and Sakura. You two, meet me first thing in my office in the morning. You'd better not be late, she said through gritted teeth. She turned to Jiraiya and spoke up. Jiraiya, you trained him more than Kakashi, so you should be able to figure out his patterns. Think about what he would do and find out where he could be going, she said quickly. He nodded and sprang into action and sprinted off into the night. Tsunade was barking orders left and right. She needed to do damage control quickly. It would only be a bit before the council heard of the whole ordeal. They would want him to be found quickly. Once they learned the truth about his parents, there would be no going back. As everyone was still in their stupor, she noticed something in the middle of the crater that was caused by the impact of the Kyuubi. Quickly dashing towards it, she kneeled and picked it up. It was his headband. To her it was now real. It dawned on her. He left, and didn't plan on coming back. Scene break the morning after. Kakashi and Sakura were currently walking to the Hokage's office. They knew they were in for a rough lesson about what they did. Sakura couldn't help feel guilty, however one thing was currently nagging her mind. Kakashi, is Naruto really the son of the fourth? She asked. He turned to her and nodded numbly. Yes, it was kept a secret for his safety. However now that doesn't matter. It's only a matter of time before the rumor spreads and the other villages learn of the truth, he said quickly. They looked around the village to see it in a cheerful attitude. It seemed they noticed the lack of certain someone. They wondered what they would do when they heard about his father. They soon arrived at Tsunade's office and opened the door. As soon as they stepped in they were met with glares from both Tsunade and Shizune. Shizune quickly left the room, probably to avoid letting her temper get the best of her. Tsunade sighed and spoke up. You two will listen very closely, and you will not interrupt me at all, she started. They both nodded and listened as she continued on. I have a mission for you two specifically. You're going to go to Suna and report what happened to their council on what happened. With them out of a cage, it's most likely the council is leading the village. He can't be out of the land of fire yet, so if he were to start moving again, he might go towards Suna. Report back once you have done just that, she said quickly. They both nodded and left for Suna. She watched as they left the office and she sighed and looked at the paperwork on her desk. One piece of parchment on her desk pertained to a certain individual. If she signed it, she couldn't go back. It would already be done. It was to make Naruto Uzumaki a official Missing-Nin. Somewhere in the land of fire, in a damp cave, a certain spiky-haired blonde was starting to stir awake. A drop of water did the damage and he bolted upright, his thoughts roaring to figure out what happened. Brat, calm down already, the Kyuubi said in his head. Naruto blinked and stood up. He looked around the cave he was in. He assumed the Kyuubi put him here when he was far enough from the village. So what happened? He muttered in his head. The Kyuubi began to tell him what had happened. Naruto's eyes narrowed when he heard about it. So my father? He asked in his head. The Kyuubi sighed and knew it was time to tell him. Your father was the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, he answered. Naruto's mind ran a blank. He then screeched in his head, which clearly annoyed the Kyuubi, with an effective shout telling him to shut it. So where are we and what now? Naruto asked quickly. The Kyuubi was silent for a bit. As he sprinted across the terrain, Naruto had his own questions he needed answered. He wondered what training the Kyuubi was going to give him. He knew it was going to be rough. He knew without a shred of doubt that it wasn't going to be easy. He knew that Fox was going to have some kind of sadistic pleasure in torturing him with grueling hours of training. He knew it was the truth too. He was currently deciding what his best course of action would be, and it was about which village to go to. He needed supplies for sure. He also needed to get out of this jumpsuit. He stuck out like a sore thumb in it. He was going to get a mask like Kakashi wore. It would definitely make it harder for someone to recognize him. He wasn't about to be stupid and waddle into Suna. He had no doubt in his mind that Tsunade had sent a party to there to inform him of his escape, so he couldn't risk it. So he was debating on going to Kusa and shopping there, then heading out again before anyone got suspicious of him. They were allies with Konoha after all. So he needed to proceed with caution. He also knew he couldn't go crazy with spending. Granted, he did save up a good bit of Ryo. However, he knew it would only last him so long, so he needed to be careful and make sure to not overspend. He needed just the essentials. So with those thoughts in his mind, he raced towards his destination. He assumed it would be an hour or two before he reached it. Before he knew it, he had already arrived at the village. He needed to be careful. He couldn't stay forever and people would know a new face. So with his thoughts in place, he walked into a general store. The clerk instantly knew he wasn't from around the village, obviously someone new. "Hi there. New to Kusa, huh? What can I help you with?" he asked quickly. Naruto looked at him and needed to put his words carefully. A missing nin was a very big deal. If the clerk had tiny bit of suspicion that he was one, he could easily go to the leader of the village and report his suspicions. Naruto cleared his throat and spoke up. "I'm in need of few supplies. Firstly, needed to get a change of clothes and some hair dye," he said quickly. The clerk narrowed his eyes. He obviously thought something was up. "Why the hair dye?" he asked quickly. Naruto gulped and decided to bluff and bullshit his way out. "I'm on an undercover mission from my village. Can't have anyone knowing who I am or recognizing me. That's why I am not wearing my headband," he bluffed. The clerk's expression changed quickly. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Very well, follow me," he said quickly. Naruto nodded and followed him. He heard the Kyuubi chuckle in his head. "Nice one, kid. A piece of advice. Maybe stop at the library and get a book or two on persuasion and deception. It would be a very useful tool to have at a moment's notice. Eventually you could get so good at it you'd have a silver tongue," he suggested. Naruto blinked. That was a pretty decent point. Why not? He thought. The clerk led him to one of the aisles and it had general goods. He looked around and spotted some of the things he needed. One was a pitch black mask that covered most of his face, leaving one eye for seeing. He decided to take it. He looked at the clothes. He picked out a sleek, tight-fitting combat jacket that had a good amount of hidden pockets. He smirked as he grabbed it. He could hide a good bit of stuff if the need arose. He picked out a matching pair of shorts and took a look at the hair dyes. He didn't want something that would stick out, one thing that would look natural if anyone asked or got suspicious about it. It was a choice between a few colors. Either red, black, a tan or a tan, sandy color. He decided to go with black, since it was pretty much the opposite of his bright yellow. No one would probably expect him to have black hair. Gathering all of his stuff, he proceeded back to the checkout. The clerk saw the mask and raised an eyebrow. Naruto saw this and quickly spoke up. Decided to get it on a whim, better safe than sorry, he mused. The clerk seemed to buy it and rang it all up. Before he knew it, Naruto was already outside. He quickly walked into a nearby alleyway and proceeded to change. Quickly throwing his orange jumpsuit in a nearby trash can, he proceeded to walk to the nearby library and decided to pick up a few persuasion books and started to read. He chuckled as he read the title, Speechcraft for Morons. However, he opened the book and started to read nonetheless. It was about 30 minutes later and he summed up what the book told him. different manners of speaking and how to use certain words to your advantage. He thought it was a pretty good idea to learn persuasion. It would definitely help him later. He eventually read what he could. He knew he couldn't stay in the village that much longer. He was sure Tsunade was already sending parties to the other villages to find any traces of him. He quickly put the book back and walked into the bathroom. It was time to dye his hair. It was a messy 15 minutes later and he finally came out with sleek black hair. He guessed no one would know he was Naruto Uzumaki. As he finally stepped out of the building, he looked at the mask and fitted it to his face. It was time to move on and decide his next course of action. Now he knew with this disguise he could go to some villages who knew his name. They wouldn't be able to see past his measures and wouldn't know it was him. Only a few people could be able to see past it. He knew if he ran into anyone from the leaf, they would be harder to fool. He still needed to focus on training too. He shuddered at what he wondered it was going to be like. So what's this training you're going to give me? Naruto asked the Kyuubi. He waited for a response from the being he held. First thing you need to learn about is your chakra. You have two types of chakra. Yours and mine, each with its own properties and affinities. He started. Naruto drew a blank. Affinities? He asked confused. He heard the Kyuubi snort before replying. I keep forgetting that those teachers you had at that academy barely taught you jack shit. You see there are 5 affinities. Earth, fire, lightning, wind and water. I have the fire affinity with my chakra, while yours is a wind affinity. He explained. Naruto's eyes widened, then he rose an eyebrow. How do you know mine is a wind affinity? He replied confused. The Kyuubi snorted again before replying. Brat, I've been with you since you were born. I can easily tell what your chakra's affinity is. Now on to the next part. Wind chakra is very deadly and precise when trained right, however I don't know how to train in that area, so we will work with my chakra. Since it's your best bet at staying alive against the hunters that will no doubt come for you, we will start with my chakra. He explained. So what exactly can I use your chakra for? Naruto asked confused. He assumed the Kyuubi was rolling his eyes as he spoke. My chakra is very powerful, as you know. It has multiple applications. The most obvious is fire release. That is the easiest to learn. However, that's not what I'm going to teach you first. Chakra is very malleable and as such can be used in multiple ways. To start your training, you need to meditate so you can come inside your mind so we can proceed with the next step. He explained. Naruto nodded to himself and found a nice spot to sit down. He slowed his breathing to a steady rate and calmed down. Not a thing interrupted him as he delved deeper into the silence. Soon he found himself going deep into his subconscious and found himself standing before the Kyuubi itself. Good, now we can proceed. He stated. The Kyuubi then held his fist out and looked to the boy. Bond our chakra together, it will be easier for you to call upon mine afterwards. He explained. Naruto nodded and placed his fist against the Kyuubi. Once he did, he felt a rush of power. Suddenly his subconscious started to fall apart as woke up. He looked at his hands to see no real difference. Now it's time for you to call upon my chakra. To do so, reach deep down and pull it from the depths. Search for an intense source. You'll know when you find it. He explained. Naruto hummed and focused. He felt a roaring sensation of pure flames. He pulled it forwards and it started to ignite like gasoline was poured on it. Suddenly chakra flowed like it endless. He looked at his body, covered in the red chakra. It was like the time when he faced Neji, except it seemed more controlled and tamed. Like he could use it freely. He chuckled as he knew he could now. Now before you go crazy and test it out like no tomorrow, you need to know this chakra is like a beacon in the night. Any sensor will be able to pick up the massive spike in energy. It's my chakra after all. You need to hurry and do some quick tests and then get rid of the chakra and get the away from the area. Anyone nearby will, he explained. Naruto nodded to himself. He knew what it meant. He should only use it when it was absolutely necessary. He was going to train a bit with it though, so he did get a good grip on it. At least he would know how to use it right when the time came. Okay, now with my chakra, you can use a very special property it can utilize. It's called Fox Fire. As a kitsune, my chakra allows for it use. Fox Fire is very powerful. It doesn't need any hand signs to use either, so it's versatile. To use it, imagine the chakra igniting and its temperature increasing. If you do it right, you will summon the Fox Fire. He explained. Naruto nodded and closed his eyes, then started to concentrate. He started to feel his hands get hot. He concentrated even more on that sensation and it felt like they were burning. He opened his eyes to see them covered in golden flames. He could tell they were very powerful. Doing an experiment, he wondered how they could be manipulated. He quickly noticed it was tougher than he thought. He was about to make the flames swirl around him like a cloak, however, that was really all he could do. He needed more practice. That is good enough for now. As you must have noticed, the fire is very difficult to manipulate. Once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to do quite a bit with it. The Kyuubi said quickly. Naruto nodded and let his chakra fade. Once it did, he took a look around. No one was around, so he knew it was okay to start to move again. He needed to think of his next course of action. He was thinking of making a pit stop to Suna and Rakan to see what was going on there, and if anyone knew his whereabouts. He needed to have some kind of information on what was going on in Konoha, so Suna it was. If you're going there, make sure to stay under the radar. I have a feeling we're gonna hit an obstacle soon. The Kyuubi said. Naruto hummed to himself and nodded to the Kyuubi's advice. He began again towards his next destination. He knew Suna was about another 5 hours from where he was. He wasn't in a hurry though. So with that in his mind, he set off at a nice pace. Scene break with Kakashi and Sakura. The two of them stood at the gates of Konoha, ready to depart to Suna. Kakashi looked to Sakura and spoke up. You ready? He asked. She nodded and both of them started. Kakashi knew this trip was going to take most of the day to make it. He wasn't in a hurry either. However, he didn't know something would cause him to rush. It was about 3 hours later and they weren't even out of the land of fire yet. It was until they felt a massive chakra spike. Kakashi and Sakura looked at each other quickly. Was that Naruto? Sakura asked quickly. Kakashi hummed and replied. Most likely. Who else do we know that has that kind of chakra? I'd say that was him starting to use the Kyuubi's chakra more. He mused. Sakura's eyes widened. She looked to where the source was coming. Anyone in the area could feel the massive chakra he was using. Let's hurry, Kakashi said quickly. Sakura nodded and they both sprinted towards where they felt the chakra. It was about 15 minutes later and they arrived at a clearing, however it was deserted. It was obvious that someone had recently been there though. We just missed him, Kakashi cursed. Sakura looked around to see anything to point his direction he was going. Any ideas where he could be going? She asked. Kakashi sighed and walked to a spot where it was barren. It was obvious the chakra made the impression in the ground. He was looking for any tracks or signs that would have been left. He looked up to the sky to see there was a good bit of daylight left. Well, there's a few options he could have chosen. Either he stopped at Kusa and did some stuff and is now heading towards Suna. If that's the case, we might catch him there. However, he may already have been to Suna and is going towards Kusa. Either way, we know he is in the area. We need to continue to Suna though. Let's hope we can find him there. He mused. They both started once again towards their destination. Before they knew it, they were already in Suna. Walking around, they spotted someone familiar to them. It was Tamari. She looked to be shopping. They walked up to her and got her attention. Tamari cautiously turned around and shocked to see them. What can I do for you? She asked quickly. Kakashi looked at her and spoke up. We need to speak to whoever is in charge, he said. Tamari raised an eyebrow. What is wrong? She asked quickly. Sakura looked down while Kakashi replied. Naruto Uzumaki had become a Missing-Nin, he said. Tamari was surprised. The little hyperactive kid had ran away. She knew something was off. There was something they were hiding. What caused the run to run away? She asked, confused. She knew something had happened. Kakashi knew he couldn't spill the secret of him being the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, it would only cause chaos among them. A long list of things that needed to be fixed. Now we believe he isn't going to give anyone a chance. We think he may be coming to Suna. He said quickly. Tamari sighed and spoke up. Okay, I'll take you to the council. Since our Kazekage died from Orochimaru, a new one hasn't been appointed. She said. They both nodded and followed her. Soon they arrived at a building and entered it. Tamari sat outside the building thinking about what could have caused such a change in the boy to make him become a Missing-Nin. She drew up a blank. She knew he practically loved the village. So why would he forsake it and desert it? She thought quickly. She had no idea just how much he was changed, and wouldn't go back at all. It was something obvious to her. She knew he was going to change. However, she didn't know just how much he would. She was interrupted by a strange feeling, like she was being watched. She looked around to see no one, yet the feeling still remained. She hesitantly took out her fan and looked around. That's when she looked up and noticed someone was watching her, or the building for some reason. She couldn't make out the appearance. With no hesitation, she hopped on her fan and used it like a glider, sending her upwards to the roof where the boy was. Once she got there, she took in his appearance. A cold breeze blew past the two of them as they stared at each other unflinchingly. Tamari had no idea who this was. She thought for a second it might have been Naruto, but Naruto didn't dress like this and didn't have black hair. Oh, how wrong would she be when all the secrets spilled out? She looked at him closely as he did. Who are you and what are you doing here? She asked quickly. He didn't answer. He feared a bit that if he spoke, she might recognize his voice. He knew Kakashi and Sakura were still in Suna as well. So he couldn't get reckless and cause a massive scene that would no doubt attract unwanted attention. I'll give you one more chance to answer me, or I will beat it out of you forcefully. She shouted angrily. She didn't like the look he was giving her. It was observant like a hawk watching its prey, but at the same time it was bored and lazy, like he thought she wasn't worth it or that he didn't have the time of the day for this. You're Tamari, brother to Gaara and Kankuro. You should leave while you still can. Naruto said in a deep voice. He was trying to mask his voice somewhat, by making it more animalistic and deeper. She narrowed her eyes and brought her fan out. Who are you and how do you know about us? She demanded angrily. Naruto sighed and realized he had no choice. It was hopeless to try to avoid this situation. Once Tamari noticed he isn't responding to her at all, she took out her battle fan. Futon. Kazekiri no Jutsu, she shouted. Naruto quickly rolled out of the way as the sharp blast of wind came at him. He cursed as he realized if he got hit by those, it could rip his mask off. He looked at her to see her sizing him up. It was obvious she realized it wasn't going to be easy. However, that wasn't going to stop her. She quickly let off another cutting whirlwind at him, which of course he easily dodged. She stopped for a second as he started to make a few hand signs. It quickly ended and with 4 words sent her into shock. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he shouted. All around her clones formed. She counted about 20 of them all ready to attack at once, and they did. They all charged at once. Futon. Kazekiri no Jutsu, she shouted again. This time she spun her fan in a circular motion, intending on hitting as many clones as she could. She did get a good bit of them. She looked to the man to see him standing still. I'm going to say this once, leave now before I have to end this. He said quickly. She scoffed at him. He lowered his head for a split second. She wondered what he was going to do. She watched as he formed a Rasengan. She looked shocked. She knew this technique and the destructive power it held. Naruto sighed and looked at her one last time and charged. In a split-second decision she rolled out of the way, but she let go of her fan. Her eyes widened as she saw the Rasengan hit the ground near her. She didn't even know what happened, but she was sent flying. Naruto cursed as he realized what he did. He knocked her off the roof of the building, and without her fan she would surely fall to her death. He knew he could save her, but it would come at a price. That price was revealing who he was. The Kyuubi seemed to read his thoughts and spoke in his mind. Just know if you do this, there's no going back. He said quickly. Naruto knew that already. He sighed and knew what he had to do. Just do it already. He shouted back to the fox. He heard a chuckle and it was like a snap, and Naruto felt the immense amount of chakra come to him. With an explosion of the demonic chakra, his appearance changed. Two tails formed as his features turned animalistic. The mask was already starting to fall off from the wind blasts he was facing earlier. Now with his transformation it did the final part and it fell on the ground, leaving him exposed. You better hurry, that girl is falling to her death. The Kyuubi mocked in his head. Naruto just growled and got on all fours and ran as fast as he could and leapt off the building. Temari looked up just in time to see something coming at her. Her eyes widened with fear as she took in the boy's appearance. Before she knew it, she was grabbed by him and hoisted on his shoulders in midair. Hold on tight, he said through gritted teeth. Naruto was losing control and fast. He didn't have any training with his transformations, so he knew it would only be a matter of time before he lost himself. Temari shut up and watched in awe as he scaled the building with his claws. Before they knew it, they were on a roof across Suna. Naruto dropped her quickly as he felt someone coming. He heard someone land and turned around to see none other than Kakashi and Sakura. Naruto. Sakura muttered sadly. Temari heard that and her eyes widened instantly. That's Naruto. She screeched aloud. She looked at the boy who was pouncing on all fours, ready to attack at any notice. I see you don't know about me that much. Naruto muttered through gritted teeth. Kakashi and Sakura were surprised to see him able to speak. They wondered if he had control. Are you in control? Kakashi asked cautiously. Naruto just glared at him and growled. For a little bit, yes. I haven't had much practice with the Kyuubi for my transformations. That doesn't matter, however. I'm not returning to that shithole of a village. He roared. Here's a little help, brat. Your transformation gets stronger with rage, while your level of control decreases as you gain more tails. To successfully remain in control of yourself, keep your mind calm and focused. He heard the Kyuubi in his head. Temari's eyes widened when she heard the word Kyuubi. He was a Jinchuriki. She quickly thought stupefied. It hit her like a train. The Kyuubi was the most powerful of the tailed beasts, with it having 9. You're the Jinchuriki for the 9 tails. She exclaimed. Kakashi and Sakura sighed and looked at the still pouncing form of Naruto. Naruto, you must come back to the village, they need you. Sakura said aloud. Naruto just glared at her and roared. You shut your mouth. Do you have any idea what it's like to be treated like a demon all your life? Tell me, what did you ever do to help me in my times of need? He shouted angrily. Temari's eyes widened once again. Gaara and him were so alike. She knew that was main reason Naruto got through to him. They were both considered demons by their respective villages. Kakashi sighed and realized there was no getting through to him. They would have to subdue him. That is if they could. Sakura, watch out. This is going to be a tough fight. Naruto will fight more animalistic and more unpredictable. Don't let down your guard. He said quickly. Sakura just scoffed and spoke up. You're right. Even if he is powered up with the Kyuubi, me and you can take him on. She said foolishly. Kakashi was about to speak up, but noticed Naruto had vanished. He quickly turned to Sakura and looked above her to see him already in midair with his claws aimed at her. He quickly dashed and pushed her out of the way just in time to hold out his hand and grab the clawed hand that was aiming right for her. Kakashi couldn't believe it. How did he get so fast? He wondered. He wondered how powerful the boy could truly become. He was under the Kyuubi's own tutelage. He had no doubt Naruto would eventually become a force to be reckoned with. However, a part of him wondered if that was good or bad. Sakura looked fearful at the way Naruto ruthlessly attacked her and Kakashi. It was obvious he was going to do everything in his power to keep them from bringing him back to the village. Kakashi managed to throw him off. He looked at him wearily as he got back. Quit while you at it. You have no chance now. I will only grow stronger from now on. Naruto raged. Temari wondered what was driving him to be like this. The boy she knew as Naruto Uzumaki was nothing like this. He was a happy and joyful kid, not a rageful monster bent on something like this. Naruto, why won't you come back? Sakura screeched. She had tears in her eyes. Naruto saw this and closed his eyes. Suddenly a wave of chakra exploded from him as another tail formed. You have the audacity to ask me that after what you two did. Remember what both you said to me that day. Both of you have no idea what I felt after all of that. No one even tried to come to my side to see what was wrong. Only Jiraiya was able to see something was wrong. Then I find out about my parents from the Kyuubi, and I think to myself, who can I trust? This is your final warning. Leave now and don't try to find me again. I will never return to that village. He roared angrily. Temari looked sad at what she heard. It wasn't on a whim that he left. No, it was from all the clashing thoughts he had about his reasons. Then he found out about people lying to him, and it only shoved him further down the path he was on now, and there was no turning back now. She could only wonder what they did to him to make him like this. She also wondered what the others did. She knew if he was a Jinchuriki he would have a hard life. Please Naruto. Everyone wants you back. Sakura said aloud. Naruto scoffed and glared at her. Enough. Go back to your Sasuke that you wanted back so much. I did bring him back for you, didn't I? Then you turn your backs on me and say I almost killed him, please bitch. He used that cursed mark with a Chidori. It's time to end this. He said quickly. Both of them tensed as he started to form a familiar hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He roared. 3 clones appeared around him, each ready to strike at any second. Temari knew this fight was starting to get out of hand. She didn't have her battle fan either. So she was useless in stopping him. Raiden. Raiju Suiga. Kakashi shouted. Naruto watched as the lightning beast came charging at him with ferocious speeds. He only had one choice. He quickly formed a Rasengan in his hand and ran forwards. Everyone watched as the demonic red chakra rolled off the Rasengan like nothing. The two opposing jutsus quickly caused a gigantic blast that made everyone cover their eyes and ears. Naruto knew he had to do something quickly. He soon would start to run out of chakra, and that would be very stupid of him and especially deadly. He also knew his control over the tailed forms were dwindling every second that passed. How do I come out of my form? He asked the Kyuubi in his head. He waited for a response from the Kyuubi. Normally you can't, however I can bring you out of it. There are other ways for you to do it as well. Chakra exhaustion is a big one, being that your chakra control is horrible, that's likely going to happen soon. It's time for you to come up with an escape plan. He heard in his head. Naruto nodded numbly and began to think on what to do. He suddenly came up with an plan, time to put it into motion. He waited as the blast calmed down and everyone gained their bearings back. They all watched as the clones didn't move, they just stayed still. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto roared even louder this time. All around them clones appeared on the roof. Kakashi and Sakura quickly put up their guards as they saw the clones. Temari wondered what he was going to do. Each clone looked at them with clear intent. They all looked to the clones to see them start to glow a golden color. It was some kind of fire. What is that? Sakura screeched. Kakashi didn't know. He knew it was some kind of fire. He knew that it was powerful also. I don't know exactly, but it is a kind of fire that Naruto must have learned how to produce. He mused. Everyone covered their eyes once again as the flames got brighter suddenly. It was starting to get intense. The heat was getting very hot as well. They suddenly heard a few scraping noises and what sounded like someone getting punched over and over again. What they didn't know is the clones had used that moment they blinded them to slingshot the real Naruto out of the way. He was already climbing the wall to get outside and into the desert and head to his next destination. Back where the fight had taken place, the blinding light had disappeared along with Naruto and his clones. Kakashi and Sakura were completely dumbfounded that he escaped. How? Sakura muttered. Kakashi didn't even respond and looked up to the sky and sighed. It was time to report to Tsunade. Tamari, on the other hand, was feeling a lot of emotions. The main one was anger. Why did they insist they needed to get him back when they knew he wasn't going to come back? She quickly thought. She was also feeling sorry for the now missing Nin. It was obvious he didn't want to come back and they weren't going to stop trying to do just that, which would only anger him more. She started to wonder where he could be going. She knew soon he would become stronger than anyone could imagine. She wondered the next time they would meet. She knew it wasn't going to be for a while. Thanks for leading us to the council, Tamari. We must report back to the Hokage now. Kakashi suddenly said. Tamari had to ask a question. What are you planning to do with Naruto? She asked quickly. She didn't flinch as Sakura glared at her. Kakashi just sighed and spoke softly. To tell you the truth, I don't know. It's up to Tsunade if she wants to pursue him. However, I know it's futile. He won't come back. He said. Sakura gasped and looked at Kakashi. We can bring him back. She argued. Kakashi just shook his head. The damage was already done, Sakura. Naruto's path is his own now. We wouldn't be able to get through to him, especially after what happened. He said softly. Sakura went to speak again, however she shut her mouth as she realized he was right. Both of them nodded to Tamari and began their journey back. Scene break near Konoha. Two figures stood atop a tree branch looking over the village hidden in the leaves. One was looking stoically at the village he once called home. The other had a thoughtful face that resembled a shark. These two were watching for any signs that could lead to a certain someone's whereabouts. He left the village about 5 days ago, correct? The man with the sword on his back. The other didn't reply just yet. He was staring at the village for a good bit. That's what the rumors say, Kisame. He said. Kisame looked at the village hidden in the leaves for a good bit. The man besides him stood up and turned around. Our spies say he was seen in Suna not too long ago. If he was spotted, he could have already left. Let's see if we can intercept him. He said. Kisame nodded and stood up. Let's go, Itachi. He said. Both of them sped off in the direction they were hoping to find their target. Both of them stopped suddenly when they saw something that intrigued them greatly. It was tracks and they were fresh. Kisame bent down to inspect them a bit closer. Someone was here very recently. They were clumsy too, like they were tired. He mused. Itachi looked around to see if there were more of them. He saw some. They were heading in the opposite direction they were going, away from Suna. You think the Jinchuriki left Suna and is headed to a new destination? Kisame asked quickly. Itachi gave a affirmative grunt. Naruto is crafty, but he is dense and sometimes stupid. Something tells me we need to proceed with caution. If he escaped both Suna and Konoha, then there's something we don't know. Itachi said. Kisame thought about it for a moment and knew from what he heard about the boy, that he was indeed crafty. He was a prankster after all, and he couldn't doubt that there was definitely something they didn't know if he escaped from both villages. You're right, his tracks though. If I think where he's going is right, we may have a problem. Kisame said suddenly. Itachi turned to him with a confused glance. What? He asked, confused. Kisame looked to him and replied. Naruto sluggishly walked under the canopy of the forest he was currently in. If he had to guess, he was at least a day from the land of lightning. He nearly escaped from Suna and it took, if not all, most of his chakra to do so. So what's your plan? He heard the Kyuubi ask in his head. Naruto was silent for a good bit. He was thinking on his next course of action. He was on his way to Kumo, but when he got there, then what? That was the missing detail in his mind. He quickly decided he would cross that bridge when the time came. He was startled when the Kyuubi suddenly spoke up. Kid, keep moving and don't stop at all. He heard. Naruto wondered what he meant by that. What was going on? He quickly thought. What's the matter? He asked in his head. The Kyuubi was silent for a good bit. We're being followed, he replied. Naruto instantly tensed. He thought he already got away from Suna. Who was following him? Those thoughts were running through his head like a speeding bullet. Who is it? He asked cautiously. He couldn't fight right now, so he needed a place to hide out for a while. He needed to rest and get his strength back before he could take on someone. Don't know exactly who, but I sense two distinctive chakra signatures that are coming towards us. He said quickly. Naruto nodded and stood up straight. He needed to conserve what little chakra he had left, so fighting them was out of the question. Even with the Kyuubi's chakra, it would still be a tough fight with it being 2 against 1. He, however, had a plan. I'm gonna call on your chakra some. I'm gonna try to confuse them with shadow clones. Make them spread out while making obvious tracks. He said quickly. The Kyuubi was silent for a good bit. You'd better hurry, they're coming closer. He said finally. Naruto nodded and started to call on the chakra. He only wanted a little bit. Only enough to make 4 or 5 clones. As the familiar red chakra covered him, he started to form the hand seals. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he shouted. 4 clones appeared in front of him, when Naruto finished giving orders. They all nodded and split up, making as many tracks as they could, purposefully making obvious that anyone could see them. Naruto then decided to take a detour. He quickly thought that they might have known where he was headed. So his 1-day trip turned into a 3-day trip. He knew what he just did would confuse them a bit and give him a window to get a good distance away. However, he needed find somewhere he could rest soon. The nearest village that he could go to was Yuga, so he decided that was where he would head for right now. Where he was right now made Yuga about a couple hours away and he could make it if he really wanted to, but he was still exhausted. So he opted for looking for something hidden, so that his chances of being discovered were slim. He also preferred something that had multiple escape routes. If the need arose, he could use them. After about 10 minutes of searching, he found a spot that was covered by dense trees and a cave that had an overhang. He didn't know how far the cave went and what was in it. He didn't want to go exploring either. Settling down by an enclosed area by the cave, he began to make a small fire pit. He wasn't going to light it yet. He needed food, so that meant only one thing. He was going to have to hunt for it. That was one thing he never had to do, so this was going to be a trial and error type thing for him. However, he wasn't going to fail. Use your chakra to enhance your senses. Use your senses to find an animal and kill it to get food. He heard suddenly. Naruto blinked quickly after hearing that. Huh, he muttered confused. He assumed the Kyuubi was rolling his eyes. Consider this your next lesson. Chakra is very malleable, as I've told you before. As such, it can be used in quite a different number of ways. Chakra can be used in a single place to strengthen that area. As such, it can be used in a multiple of ways. That boy with the dog used his chakra to enhance his smell during the fight with you. You can do the same if you learn how to. The Kyuubi explained. Naruto listened as the Kyuubi continued on. There are also different types of chakra. One could very well solve this problem you're having. It's called senjutsu. It is the natural energy that you mix with your own chakra. People who utilize this chakra are called sages, and they enter a mode called sage mode. He continued. Naruto blinked and spoke up. How do I use senjutsu? He asked. The Kyuubi chuckled before replying. To learn how to use senjutsu requires 3 things. One is sensing the natural energy, then you must let it gather around you by meditation. Then finally you must learn to mix it with your own chakra. He explained. Naruto knew there was something else that he wasn't telling him. What's the catch? He asked quickly. The Kyuubi chuckled and replied. There is a catch. You see, those toads have a special oil on their mountain that makes it easier to learn how to use the natural energy for sage mode, since we don't have that luxury. It will be twice as hard to learn it. It's not going to happen overnight. He explained. Naruto sighed as he heard the Kyuubi. He knew it was going to take a while to learn to use senjutsu, so he needed to figure out a time when he could start to meditate and learn it. After all, he was being chased and was currently a missing nin, so senjutsu would have to wait. Is there anything I can do to help find an animal to kill it, so I can get food? He asked quickly. The Kyuubi was silent for a while. You could use the first step of senjutsu to search for the natural energy that an animal would have, a life force to be exact. He explained. Naruto just sighed and found a quiet place and sat down. It was obvious to him that was all the help he was going to get from the fox this time. He sat there for about 30 minutes and started to feel something. It was like a raindrop falling on a pond and causing a ripple with the feeling spread out to him. He had a feeling that this was the natural energies that the Kyuubi was talking about. He noticed several different things around him, like dots on a map. He thought it was like a radar. He noticed one point near him was still and not moving at all. He opened his eyes and hopped on a tree limb and crept closer to where he found the source. As he neared it, he found a clearing with a deer curled up by a bush. He now understood how senjutsu worked. He still wasn't ready to actually use it with his chakra and use Sage mode, but he had no doubt he would eventually learn it. He wasn't going to fail at that. He knew what he was about to do was something he'd never thought he would do, but it was that or starving. With no choice, he took out a shuriken and hurled it with precision at the sleeping deer. 5 minutes later, he was dragging the carcass to his campsite. I'm surprised you were able to sense the natural energy that quickly. Usually it takes a lot longer. The Kyuubi said suddenly. Naruto chuckled and began to set up a fire to cook the meat. He knew most of it was going to be wasted, so he only was making a fire for a few pieces. Once the fire was lit and some meat was being cooked, he sat back and began to think more on what his plans were. He remembered from what he read about his father that he and the Raikage fought quite a bit in the Third Shinobi War, and from the stories he heard from Gigi that they had respect for each other. So he was thinking about asking the Raikage to help him out. He wondered what would come of it though. Worst case scenario, he would let the Kyuubi take over. With those thoughts in his head, he began to eat his meal and started to doze off. Scene break, with Itachi and Kisame. Both of them were severely annoyed by the little runt's stunt. They had been fooled. Damn that kid, Kisame muttered, annoyed. Itachi just looked around for anything that could lead them in the right direction, but there was nothing. This only proves my point that he is more unpredictable and clever than before. We should have seen this coming. He most likely used shadow clones as in diversion so that we would follow tracks that weren't by the real one. Itachi said quickly. Kisame nodded, but his eyes were a different story. He wanted to gut the little runt for making fools out of them. What now? He asked his partner. Itachi looked at Kisame before replying. If he is headed to Kumo like we think, then he is delayed a bit. With his diversion, he most likely had to find a place to hide out, so I doubt he has made it that far. I think he may stop at Yuga since it's in the middle of his travel plan. We head there and wait for him. He said. Kisame nodded and they both started to head to the village. Scene break, with Naruto. Naruto awoke groggily and looked around. He was still in his campsite. As he remembered all that transpired the day before, he sat up and began to think. He had no idea on the whereabouts of the two who were following him, and given the fact that he wasn't captured in his sleep, he assumed his ploy worked and he had lost them. However, he knew it wasn't over yet. No, not by a long shot. He was bound to run into an obstacle at one point. That was the life of a Missing-Nin. It was what he chose, so he had to face it head on. Quickly gaining his bearings, he started again on his way towards Kumo. He knew he better stop at Yuga to get some more supplies. He didn't feel like getting another mask. He knew eventually it would be useless. It was about 2 hours later and he saw the gates leading to the village of Yuga. He decided to take a cautious approach, just in case anyone knew who he was and if word got out he was a Missing-Nin. He walked normally into the village and looked around for a bit. It seemed normal. No one was giving him suspicious looks or glares. He assumed he was good. However, the Kyuubi's voice in his head proved him wrong. Be on your guard, I sense those same chakra signatures from the other day. They're here. Watch your back. He heard. Naruto cautiously looked around, but didn't find anyone who stood out to him. If they are close enough, can you pinpoint them? Naruto asked him. The Kyuubi was silent. Naruto should have known he could do that easily. He was planning something. What are you planning? He asked quickly. Naruto looked up to the sky as he replied. It's obvious we can't fight here, it would attract unwanted attention. We bait them into following us, once you pick out who is following us. We show a bit of power to get them to know it's us. Remember, I don't look like me anymore, so we need to let them know I'm who they are looking for. He explained. The Kyuubi chuckled. It was actually a pretty good plan. Okay, start walking around the village, make yourself noticeable, your black hair already sticks out like a sore thumb, so it shouldn't be hard to get their attention. He heard the Kyuubi. Naruto nodded and purposefully walked out in the open, stopping every few minutes looking around. He wanted them to see his face and know it was him. About 5 minutes later he was walking towards a store when the Kyuubi spoke to him. They're behind you now, the ones in the robes. He heard suddenly. Naruto looked over his shoulder, and sure enough was two people in a pair of robes he hadn't seen before. However, he saw someone he thought he'd never see again. Itachi smirked at seeing the now black-haired Naruto. Kisame couldn't believe his eyes. This boy was the one who fooled them. He couldn't believe it at all. Itachi knew Naruto was a lot stronger and more clever than ever. Naruto gave them the finger and dashed towards the gate and into the wilderness. Kisame almost raged right there as he grabbed the handle of his sword. Calm down. Naruto is being cautious, no doubt. He wants us to follow him and take the fight outside this village. He was always clever. After all, he was a prankster. Itachi said suddenly. Kisame sighed and let go of Samahata and looked towards where Naruto went. Let's go already, he said quickly. They both left the village to find Naruto sitting atop a tree limb. He had a devious grin as the two appeared. Nice of you two to join me, huh? He joked. Kisame glared at him. Itachi just sighed and spoke. I must say, Naruto, you're no longer the same boy that lived in that village. You've become someone new, he said. Naruto chuckled at his observation. You're damn right, he said with a grin. Kisame was tired of the babble and pulled out Samahata and swung it as it extended towards Naruto. However, as it got close, Naruto poofed into smoke. A clone, Kisame muttered. Itachi looked around to see a ton of clones atop the trees. At least 50 of them were sitting there waiting for a order. Even he didn't think Naruto would plan this out that well. It was obvious he was expecting them. Who's helping you? Itachi asked suddenly. Kisame looked to Itachi. Someone was helping the runt. He quickly thought. Naruto just laughed and spoke up. You're right thinking I have help. You see, it is none other than the Kyuubi I house. He said aloud. Both of them tensed. They hadn't expected that outcome. The Kyuubi was now something that made them rethink their plan. If he had been training with the nine-tailed fox, he was more powerful than before and he would known this was coming, so he would have time to prepare. Naruto, on the other hand, knew these weren't easy opponents whatsoever. His best bet would be to separate them and have clones keep the other busy while he took care of the other one. He didn't know how though. He had no idea how to separate them for a good bit. Kisame he could take on, however Itachi was a different story. The fact he had the Sharingan made that fact only concrete more. You take care of Kisame first and then I'll take over and force Itachi to retreat. He heard suddenly. Naruto nodded and began to go to work. Suddenly every clone that was perched on the trees jumped down and charged at them. Itachi just dodged and jumped in the air. Quickly forming hand seals, he shot off a fireball towards the ground. It took out a few clones. Most of them jumped back to avoid it. Kisame on the other hand used Samahata in a whirlwind motion, however he wasn't paying enough attention as the real Naruto dashed towards him and delivered a haymaker to his face. Naruto used that moment. Kisame was stunned from the punch and delivered a knee to his gut. Kisame didn't even realize what was going on until he felt a massive wind pressure. He looked to Naruto to see him holding a Rasengan and it was aimed at his chest. It was very close too. It was too late. Rasengan! Naruto shouted. That was when Kisame was sent flying into a tree. He was barely conscious. He sluggishly got up and was standing still. Itachi looked at his partner and sighed. He knew this was bound to happen. Naruto looked to the sword on the ground and smirked as he picked it up. As he did, both Itachi and Kisami's faces lit up in pure shock. How? Kisame stuttered, stupefied. Itachi couldn't believe it either. What do you mean? Naruto asked, confused. It was just a sword, right? He thought, confused. Samahata is a sentient sword, it picks its user. Most of the time spikes erupt out of the handle when someone who isn't worthy to wield it picks it up. Obviously it hasn't rejected you, I wonder why. Kisame explained. Naruto looked at the sword and sure enough, he wasn't being rejected by it. However, he felt it sapping at his chakra, little by little. It was the trade-off though, he knew it came with a price. It saps your chakra, right? He asked. Kisame nodded. Naruto wondered if the Kyuubi had something to do with it. Maybe since I'm a Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi, it likes my insane chakra reserves. He mused. Suddenly Itachi dashed forwards at blinding speeds. Naruto barely had enough time to put up the sword to block. As Itachi's fist met the blade, he stepped back. Naruto was starting to call on the Kyuubi's chakra. His body suddenly started to glow a bright orange. Itachi widened his eyes as the golden fire swirled around Naruto. What is this fire? He asked quickly. Naruto chuckled before replying. It's called Fox Fire. It's a fire usable by kitsunes. As such, the Kyuubi is a kitsune and his chakra allows me to use it. As you've probably already noticed, it is very powerful. He explained. Itachi backed up and reevaluated his opponent. This was another unknown variable he hadn't expected. Suddenly Kisame stood back up. Naruto looked dryly at him. Really, you want more? He asked dryly. Kisame didn't even respond and charged. Naruto held Samahata up to block again. He knew this fight was about to end quickly. If he could just get Kisame down for good, then the Kyuubi could take over and take care of Itachi. Kisame was pretty much already dead, with no water around to use his jutsu. He was useless without Samahata. With a swift motion, Naruto swung the sword and it extended towards Kisame, piercing right through his chest. Ironic, isn't it? Killed by the very sword I wielded. He muttered as he fell on the ground. Itachi sighed and looked at Naruto. It's time to finish this. He said. Naruto didn't say anything. Itachi suddenly put his guard up when he felt the rise in chakra. You're damn right, I'm gonna finish this. The Kyuubi said. Itachi backed up. This wasn't Naruto he was dealing with anymore. Who are you? He asked. The Kyuubi just chuckled and charged his chakra as three tails formed. I think you know Itachi Uchiha. He spat out the last name. Itachi's eyes narrowed, then he closed them. When he opened them, it wasn't the normal Sharingan, they were the Mangekyo Sharingan. Ah, those accursed eyes you Uchiha are famous for. Unfortunately, they won't help you this time. The Kyuubi chuckled. Itachi narrowed his eyes as the Kyuubi formed a hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he shouted. Itachi quickly looked around to see a ton of clones all in Kyuubi form and ready to attack. It was getting out of hand. Suddenly all of them charged at him. He was only able to dodge a few as more kept coming. He was suddenly elbowed in the gut and kicked backwards. Amaterasu. Itachi muttered. He waved his hand and the black fire came towards the clones, hitting a few of them. They disappeared. However, he wasn't paying attention and got hit by a fox fire-covered fist. Itachi quickly realized this situation was getting out of hand. He needed to retreat. The Kyuubi was an opponent he didn't want to take on alone. Seeing no choice, he vanished in a poof of smoke. Shunshin, huh? The Kyuubi chuckled. Naruto looked up to the sky as Itachi fled the scene. He knew he had an easy fight with Kisame. It was a matter of him already planning it out and having everything fall into place. He knew he wouldn't get that luxury again. They would know if he was trying to trick him. So off to Kumo, huh? He heard the Kyuubi. Naruto blinked and wondered where this was going. What's your plan? The Kyuubi asked suddenly. Naruto sighed and realized the Kyuubi was right. He couldn't just walk into Kumo and speak to the Raikage without some sort of plan. That would be utterly foolish for him to do. The meeting would most likely cause quite a stir within the Raikage and he would no doubt want to recruit him. Naruto didn't want that though. No, he wasn't planning on joining another village just for it to end up like the last one. He would have to play his cards right, and if went well and he got what he wanted, he would have no problem helping out the Raikage when he needed it. He was thinking of becoming something like a freelance mercenary, that would give him the chance to continue to explore and gain more skills as well. In addition to having influence with different cages. When we meet with him, he wouldn't really believe me that I'm Minato's son. So we need to convince him somehow, or you do. He started. The Kyuubi snorted and spoke up. No doubt, you don't really look like the fourth with that hair color. I assume you want me to take over and talk to him when you mention your father. The Kyuubi replied. Naruto nodded and began to think again. We also can't let him blindside us, he will have an ulterior motive no doubt. Everyone has something they want out of it, we need to keep the details in our favor, so we aren't being purposefully used. He continued. The Kyuubi laughed loudly after hearing Naruto. Damn kid, I'd never thought I'd see the day when you actually used your brain. He joked. Naruto just shook his head while chuckling, it was time get serious after all. He needed to be cautious. What exactly are you hoping to get out of this meeting? The Kyuubi asked suddenly. Naruto blinked, he hadn't really thought of that one. He sighed and sat down, time to start going over what was essential and what could wait. Firstly, we need Kumo to be a refuge of some sorts, preferably under the radar so no one gets wind of where I might be hiding out, if the need arises. Secondly, some training in Kenjutsu would be nice. Overall training would help too. He started. The Kyuubi was silent for a bit. Personally, in my opinion, you should have left that sword there. However, with right training it will become a very useful weapon. He said. Naruto just shook his head and stood up. He was going to stop by Yuga again to get supplies then head straight for Kumo. He needed to be careful though, he was sure that Tsunade would be sending teams out to bring him back, and if they were to find him it wouldn't be an easy fight. Hell no, it wouldn't. It was time for him to start building up on his skills a bit more. He might have to stop by a library again in Kumo, that is if he made it there first without interruptions. With those thoughts in his mind he headed off once again. Scene break. Konoha. Tsunade was having quite a day. She had just heard Kakashi's report about the encounter with Naruto in Suna. He was officially a Missing-Nin now, and nothing could change it. It was only going to get worse, she knew it too. The council already heard about his heritage and demanded that he be brought back, they were naive and foolish though. She knew he would never come back willingly. However, that didn't stop them, they wanted him to be found. More like demanded him, even she, the Hokage knew butting heads with the council was stupid. So she had requested 2 teams to meet her today at her office to brief them on their new mission. Those 2 teams were Team 8 and 10. Suddenly the door opened revealing none other than those 2 teams. Asuma and Kurenai both stepped in first with their respective teams following behind them. Lady Tsunade, you requested us? Asuma asked curiously. Tsunade nodded and looked at everyone. I'm sure you know of Naruto Uzumaki's status as of late. She asked rhetorically. All of them nodded numbly, it was a very delicate subject nonetheless. A secret that was kept from most had been revealed and the effects were still rippling throughout the village. Tsunade took a deep breath and prepared herself for what she was about to say next. Once she did, there was no going back whatsoever. Kakashi just filled me in about an encounter with Naruto at Suna, it seems he's bent on not returning. He made it very clear to both Sakura and Kakashi as they tried to subdue him, but ultimately failed. He escaped once again and is on the move again. She started. Everyone's eyes widened. Kakashi failed? Ino asked shocked. Asuma and Kurenai obvious felt the same way. Kakashi was a person not to take lightly. Tsunade nodded numbly and continued where she left off. It seems he has gotten some training from the Kyuubi and has developed a type of fire he can use. Kakashi said he used it to blind them and escaped from there. She explained. Kurenai had a thoughtful expression on her face. Kaden Jutsu? She asked suddenly. Everyone turned to her as she asked it. They turned to Tsunade to see her shaking her head. Kakashi said he didn't use any hand seals or call out any names, all he did was call on the Kyuubi's chakra and the fire started to form shortly afterwards. She said. Everyone was perplexed by that statement. If that was true, it meant he was obviously growing stronger and had very useful stuff at his disposal. Also, that fire was very powerful. If it didn't use his own chakra and wasn't a Kaden Jutsu, it was obviously something they needed to watch out for. Your mission is to do the same thing Kakashi failed to do. Subdue him, not kill him. We need him back here. Now that everyone knows he's the son of the fourth Hokage, the council is foaming at the mouth to get him back. She explained. Everyone nodded. They wondered how this would all plan out. I'll leave the details on how you want to deal with it to yourselves, just get it done. She said with finality. They all nodded and left the office. As they walked out, they started to talk among themselves. So how do we go about doing this? Kurenai asked aloud. Asuma thought about it for a good bit. If we can get him to come peacefully, that's good, however we know that won't happen at all. Let's see. If he left Suna, he wouldn't stay in the land of wind that long, and he wouldn't go to Iowa. He must know how much they hate the name Namikaze. So Kumo, he said aloud. Shikamaru decided to speak up. Most likely, he knows he couldn't linger around Suna. He may act like an idiot, but he is fairly smart when it comes down to what matters. If he's serious about not coming back, he couldn't afford to make foolish decisions. He added. Kiba suddenly spoke up. You really think that Dobi can beat us all? 8v1 is a very unfair setup. He said indignantly. Shikamaru just shook his head and replied. Beat us? No. Outsmart us? Most likely. He isn't an idiot like most people think. How do you think he beat you at the Chunin exams? If he sets his mind to something, he can be very clever. I guarantee you that he has already anticipated the Hokage sending us, due to our abilities and who we are. He most likely knows what to expect from us. It would be very hard to fight us all. So he is most likely coming up with a plan to deceive us, and I wouldn't be surprised if it worked. Shikamaru said aloud. Kiba shut up after that. He knew it was true. There was more to Naruto than what everyone saw. They didn't look past the goofy surface to see what was underneath. We're also about 3 to 4 days away from Kumo, not counting setting up camp every night. That only adds more to his advantage. Shikamaru added. Asuma looked up to the sky as he spoke. Shikamaru is right, this won't be a run-of-the-mill mission. Combined with the tutelage of the Kyuubi, Naruto is even more dangerous and unpredictable. He said. Kiba noticed Hinata was fiddling with her fingers. He knew she was thinking about something. Most likely Naruto. What's the matter, Hinata? He asked curiously. Everyone stopped and turned to the shy girl. She looked up and spoke. I don't understand why Naruto turned out like this. She explained. Shino, surprisingly, was the one to speak up after her. What would you think if you suddenly found out you were to being lied to your whole life, and on top of that having to keep a secret yourself, such as the Kyuubi, and carrying such a burden along with it? No wonder he finally snapped from it all. He said quickly. Everyone turned to him as he spoke. They were shocked he would come up with that answer. However, they knew it was the truth. Kurenai turned to Kiba to ask him a question. Kiba, you should be able to track Naruto by his scent. She asked. Everyone turned to him, waiting for his answer. He thought about it for a good bit. It was possible. It's possible. His scent may have changed, depending on what he does to keep himself from not being recognized. We know from Kakashi's report he changed his appearance quite a bit, so we know it's going to be hard to find him. To track him I would need something to start off with, so I know what scent to look for. He answered. Shikamaru looked in thought for a moment. Like a piece of cloth or something? He said. Kiba nodded and spoke up. A piece of his clothes would be perfect. He replied. Before anyone knew, they were breaking into his old apartment to get just that. As they did, Kiba finally got what he needed and they were heading out to the gates of the village. So how should we go about doing this? Asuma asked suddenly. Shikamaru spoke up quickly after that. I think we should stay together, with all of us. It's harder for him to get away. With Kiba's tracking, we know that we can find him. All of us have our own specialties and techniques, and if we use them together, we have a better chance. He said aloud. Everyone nodded and they began on their way towards the land of lightning. It was the day after when everyone was continuing on towards Kumo. They had recently entered the land of hot water when Kiba stopped suddenly. Kurenai was the first to notice it and looked at him confused. What's wrong, Kiba? She asked suddenly. Everyone turned to him as Akamaru and him were sniffing the air. It seemed he caught something. However, it wasn't Naruto's scent. I smell a dead body. It's foul, like it's been sitting there. He said suddenly. Everyone widened their eyes as Akamaru started to bark and run into the woods. Kiba took off and everyone followed him. A dead body meant one thing: there was a fight between two or more people and someone paid the ultimate price. Their life. Everyone stopped shortly after to see a body lying face down in the dirt. It was wearing robes that none of them recognized. They were all cautious as Asuma rolled the body over. They were looking at the dead body of Kisame Hoshigaki. Hey, I recognize this guy, he's in the bingo books. Kisame Hoshigaki, AS rank Missing-Nin, known as the monster of the hidden mist. Asuma said suddenly. Everyone turned to him as he said that. They were shocked this guy was defeated. Do you think Naruto is responsible for this? Ino asked. Everyone looked to Kurenai and Asuma as they looked at each other, like they were having a silent conversation. If he did, he got him by surprise. This area has the perfect makings for a setup for a trap. Looks like he walked into it. His sword is gone too. Naruto most likely took it as a prize, that and it would be a very useful sword to wield. Asuma said suddenly. Shikamaru looked in thought for a second. What sword? Kiba suddenly asked. Everyone else wanted to know that as well. Kisame Hoshigaki was known to carry a sword by the name of Samahata, it one of the swords that the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, and it is renowned for being the most dangerous and terrifying of all of them. It can be very dangerous if wielded right. Kurenai answered. They all looked shocked after that statement. If Naruto was the one who did this, then it only proves my point that we need to tread with caution. If we don't, we may wind up walking right into a trap. Shikamaru said suddenly. Everyone nodded and looked around for anything that could lead them in the right direction. Ino kneeled near the body to examine it. The wound isn't fresh, the blood has already dried. This was done a day or two ago. It's laid here ever since. She said. Everyone sighed as they realized what it meant. He was a good bit ahead of them. They needed to catch up quickly. We better get back on track. Kiba said. Everyone nodded and they left the area and started heading towards Kumo. Scene break, with Naruto. Naruto was close to Kumo, about an hour or so if he walked. However, he was going at a faster pace. He stopped at Yusa to get some more supplies earlier. He picked up a few ninja tools that would help him. He knew Tsunade would send a team or two to retrieve him, so he needed to be prepared for when they met. He knew it wasn't going to be friendly. They would most likely use force, however not lethal force. Tsunade would have their asses if he came back in a body bag. He planned on stopping at Kumo's library before requesting to meet with the Raikage. He needed to learn a few things. Those things were going to help him when he faced the teams that were sent to get him. Before he knew it, he was already walking through the hidden cloud village. He liked the way it looked. Eventually he spotted the Raikage's tower, but he knew that was for later. It was obvious he was an outsider. He got some curious glances here and there, but they were hostile or vicious. He chuckled as he walked into the village's library. He continued to ignore the obvious stares and looked for a few books he was needing. They were about psychological warfare, underhanded tactics. Anything that remotely revolved around deception and guerrilla warfare really would work for him as of now. After searching for a good 25 minutes, he found a couple of books he was going to learn from. They had some good titles that drew him in. They were The Psyche, How It Works, An Art of War, divide and conquer. Before anyone knew it, a quick shout of Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and a clone appeared and sat down next to the real Naruto. After an hour of reading the two books, he had a good understanding of how to effectively use psychological-based attacks and how to use your situation to your advantage with traps and setups. He knew with what he learned he would be able to take on a team now. It was now time to meet the Raikage. Are you ready, kid? He heard the Kyuubi. Naruto nodded and left the library and headed towards the tower where the meeting that no one would ever forget would happen. As soon as he stepped in the building, he was instantly stopped. They knew he wasn't from around here. They were definitely suspicious. It was shortly after when a young man with dark skin and white hair that covered his left eye walked in front of Naruto and spoke in a slightly bored but highly cautious tone. Who are you and why are you here? He asked quickly. Naruto should have known this would happen. I'm here to speak to the Raikage regarding a certain fellow that is known as the Yellow Flash. He said aloud for everyone to hear. He watched subtlety to see their reactions. It was instantaneous. They all tensed and were on guard after hearing those two words. They all knew about the power that Minato Namikaze had and how much fear he spread with his famous techniques. The man in front of him narrowed his eyes. Who are you? How do you know that name? He asked, deadly serious. Naruto gave him a serious look. What I have to say must only be said in a private audience with the Raikage himself. He said calmly. The man didn't back down and spoke in a deadly calm tone. You say that and you obviously radiate the word secret. After all, you have a very famous sword on your back. Where is Kisame Hoshigaki? He said aloud. Naruto chuckled and replied. Shark face. Check the forests by Yuga. If you find his dead body, you'd know the answer. He joked. The man's eyes widened. Kisame was defeated by this boy. The situation suddenly turned 180. He needed to keep it under control. This boy was an unknown and he needed to proceed with caution. You defeated Kisame? He asked disbelievingly. Naruto nodded and spoke again. Itachi Uchiha was with him, however he got away. He said calmly. Now this surprised everyone. The traitor who slaughtered the whole Uchiha clan with ease ran away from this kid. They all thought. The man finally relented and spoke up. Very well. Follow me and don't make any sudden movements. He said deadly serious. Naruto nodded and followed him as they walked up a staircase. He didn't fail to notice two people were following behind him. They're Jinchuriki kid, watch out. He heard the Kyuubi say in his head. Naruto hummed to himself and didn't look back at the two of them. He didn't want to raise any suspicion now. They soon arrived at a large door and the man in front of them walked in. He came out shortly after and motioned for Naruto to come inside. Sitting in his desk with a stern, yet inquisitive look was the fourth Raikage himself. Once everyone was inside, Naruto looked around the room, also taking subtle glances at the positions of everyone. It was planned out. The girl was stationed by the door, while the two men were behind the Raikage. This meeting was going to be tense. Now my right-hand man Darui here says you have some words to speak to me about a very important person that everyone knows the name of. Minato Namikaze. The Raikage said quickly. Naruto nodded and chuckled. Also that you defeated AS rank Missing-Nin, Kisame Hoshigaki. The proof is that very sword you have on your back. He said again. Naruto nodded again, and when the Raikage didn't speak again, he knew it was time for him to speak up. Now before I start, I'd like you to not judge me or jump to conclusions until you hear my full story. He said. Everyone raised an eyebrow, but nonetheless they complied. Firstly, I'm a Missing-Nin from Konoha. He said. Everyone tensed and almost drew their weapons, however the Raikage's hand went up to stop them. His eyes were hardened though. Watching for any deceit. I'm sure you all have heard the story of the attack on Konoha by the Kyuubi. Naruto asked. They all nodded. The Raikage was wondering where this was going. Yes we do, however that doesn't explain your Missing-Nin status. He said. Naruto sighed and spoke up. You see, the story that is told today is an abridged version to hide the truth. Naruto explained calmly. Everyone wondered what was about to be said. What's the full story then? The girl behind him asked. Naruto sighed. He knew once he said it there was no going back. His secret would be out. The reason I'm here today is for a number of reasons actually. It revolves around a lot actually. Back to the actual story, you see it is told that the fourth Hokage, Minato himself sacrificed himself to kill the Kyuubi. That is not the truth though. Granted it is somewhat, but not the full truth. He said. Everyone's eyes widened. Raikage was starting to have a sneaky suspicion where this was going. What's the truth then? He asked. Naruto sighed and looked directly at him. Minato Namikaze didn't kill the Kyuubi, he sealed it in his newborn son. That is me, Naruto Uzumaki. He said calmly. The whole room tensed, then everyone laughed loudly. It was obvious they didn't believe him, the Raikage was furious though. You dare spit those lies. You insult the memory of the very person who sacrificed himself to save your village. Be glad he did, or that monster would have obliterated your home. He shouted while slamming his fist on the desk. Naruto sighed and knew it was time for Plan B, however before he could speak up. He fell on his knees. Yo bro, what's with the demonic flow? The man next to the Raikage said suddenly. Everyone looked at the kneeling form of Naruto. I sense it too, it's rageful. The girl said. It seems they may have pissed off the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi had taken over forcefully. He sneered at the Raikage as he stood back up. It seems the Raikage didn't notice the Kyuubi taking over and laughed again. You can quit the act, kid. He said.